Hey, I'm Sarah.
And I'm Amy.
Welcome to United Humans, a podcast that goes into the personal lives of our 6,000 plus volunteer medics and their families.
75-year-old male, possible cardiac arrest.
My name is Gabi Friedson.
I'm Dina. This is Ronnie. We're a couple.
I'm Vicky.
United Hatzalah's only mission is saving lives, and we'll discuss how that doesn't leave room for discrimination against color, race, religion, or sexual orientation.
Let's talk about fear, trauma, pain, and connection.
Join us. Let's discuss these diverse volunteers from all across the country. Welcome back to United Humans, a podcast where we go into the personal lives of our incredible 6,000 plus volunteers in United Hatzalah. Today, I would say, is more of a heavy episode. I'm sitting here with Pnina Peretz from Modiin. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you for having me.
I wish we were able to sit and talk about a million other things. The topic is a heavy one, and I'm sure it's very, very difficult to talk about. So I thank you for opening up to our listeners. So we're going to be speaking about this is in honor of Yom HaZikaron, which in English is Memorial Day, which was created for our soldiers in Israel, but over the years have also begun to include anyone who was killed for the country of Israel in a terrorist attack or anything of the like. So it's a very somber day here in Israel. For those of you who have never had this day in Israel, and hopefully you are commemorating this day no matter where you are in the world. But Pnina, I know you have a very difficult story. You can start at any point you feel you want to start, but we would love to hear.
Sure. While it is a sad story and obviously an enormous tragedy for my family and the country of Israel, it has also brought a lot of unity, a lot of chesed, a lot of smiles to people's faces and things that have happened since. So, it is a bittersweet kind of day for everyone. But yes, it definitely is something that is hard for us all today and really every day of the year, but especially as this time of the year comes around, it's a bit more difficult for myself and my family.
Of course. Why don't we start from where are you from originally? Okay. Clearly not Israeli.
I am not. So my family and I made Aliya almost 30 years ago. This summer will be 30 years.
Wow.
From Dallas, Texas.
I don't hear an accent. Can't be.
I can do one if you want.
Oh, there we go.
There you go. So we made Aliya from Dallas, and my father is a rabbi, and we kind of moved around a bit. So I'm the oldest of six, and one was actually born here a year after we made Aliya, but we moved here straight to Ra'anana, actually, which was a great landing for our family. I didn't know a word of Hebrew when I came. I actually had never even been to Israel before we made Aliya, and I came straight from high school to Israel. So it was a bit of an adjustment. I can't say I was too happy to come, but I'm still here. So I guess somewhat of a success story.
We like to hear those. Those are good.
Yeah. So I'm the oldest of six, and my brother Ari was 2.5 years younger than me. He was the oldest boy. After me was my sister Tali, then Ari, and then I have a brother Eli, who's 2 years younger than Ari, and then two siblings that are much younger. So we made Aliya when we were pretty much in our teens, and settled in Ra'anana, and spent many years there until we all finished with school and moved on in our lives.
Wow. What did you do after high school?
I did 2 years of Shirut Leumi. One of them was in a hospital in Shaarei Tzedek in Jerusalem, and I worked in the high risk and the delivery ward, which was an amazing, amazing year. And my second year, I actually did Shlichut in Florida through Bnei Akiva. And my sister also was in a hospital for 2 years, and my brother's obviously, drafted into the army here.
Tell us about that. I'm curious to know, besides your involvement, first of all, when did you join United Hatzalah? How many years have you been?
So I've been with Hatzalah for almost 2 years. I graduated my course. June will be 2 years. So
wow. Did you take the NREMT course?
I did. I took the course in English with Ari Deutsch. He's amazing. It was offered in English in Modiin, and we were about 25 people in our group, and it was really just an amazing course. And the knowledge we learn is a gift that we will always carry with us, obviously in our daily work in Hatzalah, but also, for just the knowledge of knowing how your body works and how to act in any kind of scenario. It's really amazing. I'm grateful that I had the opportunity to do it, especially in English.
And do you work besides?
Yeah, I work in Modiin. I work in advertising there. And I have 2 children. And I'm married to an Israeli, so another check on that Aliya success list.
Impressive.
Yeah, we live in Modiin.
Amazing. So you did Shrut Leumi, and you said your brother's was 2 years younger than you.
Right.
And so he went from high school straight to the army?
So he did a year of yeshiva in Aliya, a mechina, and then went into the army, which was, an eye-opening experience for all of us. We had, semi-recently made Aliya and hadn't had any experience with the army. My grandparents were Holocaust survivors, and it was always their dream to see their roots be sown here in Israel, and for them it was, amazing. They flew in whenever they could to see, Ari in uniform and be present at all of the different ceremonies.
It was a lot
the
of
Army
pride.
had. So it was something that we were all very, very proud of. Yes. So Ari was in the elite unit of the Palchan Nachal, the Nachal Brigade. He was a sharpshooter in his unit, and he really transformed to a different person in the army. Ari was always quiet and humble, skinny, little, kind of shy and meek. And when he went into the army, he suddenly got this bout of pride and happiness and really became a man, went from a boy to a man. And we were able to see that change in him. He, got wider and more muscular. And sometimes he would come home for Shabbatot, and, my mom, everyone would look at him. And also with the amount of food he would eat, we realized that he really, was a different person, mostly in the way he carried himself. He was social, he was outgoing, he was proud of himself and what he was doing, and that carried him through his army service.
How long was he in the army for?
So he was in the army, I want to say for 20 or 22 months. He was almost finished with the army. I think he was 9 months short of finishing. Ari hadn't been home for, I want to say, 7 chagim in a row. He was, in an elite unit. This was during the Intifada in 2002. He was a sharpshooter, so he was sought after. And also with his personality, many times he offered to stay in for the weekend to let other soldiers go home to their families. So he had was able to come home for Simchas Torah. And he had a tekes, a ceremony in the army shortly before. So my grandparents had flown in from the States, from Cleveland, to be with him here.
Wow.
And we all celebrated with him that weekend. We will never forget the holiday, all of our family together, dancing with the Torah, laughing, being together as a family, taking photos, and sadly never realizing that would be the last time we would see him. So that's after that weekend. It was over a Shabbat, I believe. Sunday morning, he went back to the army.
This is in 2002.
This is in 2002. September 29th was actually my brother Ellie's birthday, and Ari had called Ellie to wish him happy birthday, and Ellie was in the army actually himself at the time, couldn't speak, and told him that he would call him later. Never got a chance to, and I think that's one of his big regrets. And on September 30th of 2002, it was about 5 p.m. in the afternoon, and Ari and his friend Shai, they were guarding a building in Shechem, in the Kasbah in Shechem, that was used as Hamas headquarters for a lot of their paperwork and a lot of very important documents. And they were on guard duty, Ari and his friend Shai, and a sniper from across the road saw them, actually shot at Shai first, a bullet hit him in the spine and Shai collapsed right away. Ari saw this and jumped up and fell on Shai to protect Shai, we believe. And Ari was shot on the shoulder that penetrated his lungs and was killed instantly, pretty much. We have a photo of Ari and Shai that they took together about 15 minutes before, with a timer, a self-timer, right before they started their guard duty. That's a picture. It's obviously our last picture of Ari. That's, the look he had, the smile he had on his face. And that's how we'll always remember him. Shai survived. He is paralyzed from the waist down. But he has made himself a wonderful life. He's married. He has 3 children.
Incredible. I remember you telling me this and I was like, wow.
He named one of them Ariel after my brother.
Wow.
My father is a rabbi and married them shortly after this happened.
Very close in touch.
So we are close in touch, yes. Thank God. We're actually in very close touch with his whole unit. This was the quote unquote only real terror that they faced, although I'm sure a lot of them have PTSD from this. It kind of brought everyone as a unit together. And now, almost 20 years later, every year on Yom HaZikaron and most also on his yahrzeit, come together to the cemetery. It's also a time for them to bond and to touch base. And, most of them are married with children. A lot of them, have named kids after Ari. One of them has a tattoo of a lion with Ari's name on it. So I guess they, remember him in many different ways.
Each way is really special.
And it is very special for us as a family, to see that camaraderie and that bond between them and us, and gives us a little bit of chizuk from year to year.
Wow. Where is he buried?
So Ari is buried in the military cemetery in Renana. And actually, they've recently just built a cemetery adjacent to the military cemetery for parents of bereaved soldiers. Wow. And when the last of my siblings got married, my parents felt that, thank God, we are all settled with our own families. They felt they didn't want Ari to be buried by himself, so they actually bought plots in this cemetery so that he wouldn't be alone, and they would be right there next to him. So again, bittersweet. But beautiful.
What does Yom HaZikaron look like for you and your family? For the whole country, everyone's mourning, but when you have someone in your family, it's an entirely different situation.
So I remember, before Yom HaZikaron, obviously living in Israel, it is this somber day that you can't really describe unless you're here. It is a day where sad music is played on the radio, where tears fall from people's faces in the middle of nothing, remembering, thinking, seeing. No movies are shown on television. Restaurants, shops are closed. The mood in the country is just very somber. And I remember, I think the year before this happened, I made a point. I love seeing how the whole country stops when you have that moment or 2 moments of silence.
So for
when
those
that
who are not familiar, you want to...
So, and at the eve of Remembrance Day of Yom HaZikaron, there is a 1-minute siren, and then the following morning there is a siren, and the whole country comes to a complete stop. There is nothing in this world that anyone can experience like the siren on Yom HaZikaron. Cars in the middle of the highway stop, get out, stand up, bow their heads, and show respect for the thousands of soldiers and victims of terror that has led to us living our lives free in this country today. And for anyone who has not experienced that, I'm sure you can YouTube it and see clips of this, but it is something that is so special and really you cannot experience this anywhere else in the world. So I remember the year before, I actually made a special trip to Jerusalem to be in a very busy corner to experience that and really see firsthand, what it is and what it means to our country. Unfortunately, after that year, I never have that opportunity to be somewhere public as I'm with my family. commemorating Yom HaZikaron and ceremonies for Ari and Renana. But it is something that's very special. And ever since then, I kind of refer to Yom HaZikaron as the 8th day of Shiva. It is a sad day. Every day is a sad day. And almost 20 years have gone by, and I want to say that there hasn't been a day where I haven't thought about Ari for some reason or another. And Yom HaZikaron is kind of a day where everyone is mourning together with us. So it is a hard day for my family and I. And it's also hard to then make that switch over to Yom Ha'atzmaut. You have that Yom HaZikaron, and you quickly then move from this immense sadness to this utter pride, joy, happiness, barbecue, partying. And for me and my family, that was always a difficult transition.
So I was going to ask you about that, because it's something that I've really struggled with since I made Aliya, even before. I mean, there's a lot of explanations why it was built like that. And for a lot of people, it's the answer to the question, and why us. I feel that the closest thing I could ever imagine to having something experience like that, I've said this a few times, was that when we went to Poland, I was 18, I was in seminary, we went to Poland, and we were there for the Siyam HaShas. And the Siyam HaShas started in Yeshivas Chachmei Lublin, which is in Lublin, and we were on screen together with Pnina Weiss and Madison Square Garden and us sitting in the yeshiva where this was commemorated. And I remember sitting there, and it was the most confusing thing, because early that afternoon we had been in Madanik, and it was the most horrible experience. We went from there to this unbelievable excitement within an hour and a half. And it was so hard to hold for anyone who's ever been to like a funeral and then had a wedding that night. Right. How do you do that transition? Right. How do you hold both together? And how do you see do you see Yom HaAtzmaut as a comfort or an answer to Yom HaZikaron, or?
I mean, we definitely see the connection, and it is a beautiful day. If you put all the loud, crazy partying aside, it is a beautiful day. You hear songs on the radio about the founding of our state. You have people eat falafel. You have families get together, and you have a special tefillah where you say Hallel, which really shows how this day is so important. So yes, it is a beautiful day. But for me personally, I find it difficult to change my mood so quickly, being affected so personally by this. So my Zionism shoots up. I enjoy watching the Tekes on television. I don't really go out. Now that I have children, I don't want them necessarily to see this day as, a sad day and understand really the meaning behind it. So we try and do what we can to have them enjoy the day as well. And usually the next day, we love to watch the Chidon HaTanakh, the Bible quiz on TV. And we take it easy that day. We don't, it is hard for my family and I. But we use that day to kind of reflect on Ari, on the day that was, talk to people about it. Every year I speak in front of a different audience. A lot of times.
Speaking this year?
I'm actually not speaking this year. I needed a break. But every year almost I've flown all over the world to speak about Ari. The past few years I've done it over Zoom with Corona. But it's important that, a lot of people in Israel can somewhat be connected to a fallen soldier, but people in the diaspora sometimes find it hard to connect to this day. So hearing a story of someone from someone they can really relate to, I like my Starbucks coffee and shop at the Gap just like you do. And, this is a story I have to tell. So I think it really goes far with, Jewry in the diaspora. So I try and speak not only about the sadness and the tragedy of what happened, but at the closeness of how it brought us as a people, as a family, as a nation together, and the beauty that my family has seen come out of such a tragedy. So it is, important, for us to remember that and to tell our story to other people.
When you think, I would love to hear, I mean, many times in these situations, we hear so many details about the death, and we don't hear enough details about the life. Can you tell us a little bit about Ari as a kid, or his legacy, that you feel that this is what we hold on to, you know, this is the memories that we have, just to give a glimpse of who he was?
Yes, you know, sometimes I feel like a lot of people, after their death, glorify the one who has fallen. And Ari was a regular kid. He was a great kid. Like I said, he was shy and quiet. He was skinny and little and, you know, had a couple friends, but wasn't very outspoken. He was great at playing basketball. And I think when we made Aliya, you know, my mom shoved a ball in his hands, and that was his key to making friends. He was a peacemaker. He, you know, had 4 siblings in 4.5 years.
Wow.
You know, wasn't easy for my parents, and Ari was always the one to try and break up all the sibling fights. But he was just a great kid. He loved living life. He traveled when he could. He had multiple girlfriends, not at the same time. But he was just a great guy. And
Wow.
a lot of times, you know, we think today, you know, last year would have been Ari's 40th birthday. And we think, you know, where would he be today?
I was
And
about to say, what do you imagine?
What kind of father would he be? And, you know, what kind of uncle would he be to our kids? And, you know, it's sad. It's sad that he will forever be 21 while his friends and his, you know, classmates and everyone just, you know, keep growing older. But like I said, we try and focus on the happy things, the joy that it brings. I did a project last year for my parents, and I took the 17 or 18 children that have been named after Ari. And I had pictures taken of each one of them holding up a sign with their name and that they're named after Ari. And it is really, really beautiful to see kids, relatives, non-relatives, friends from the army, friends from growing up, people, you know, that really had a childhood connection to him or had barely a connection to him, but just found his story and our family so inspiring that chose, you know, to name their child after Ari. You know, my son is named after him, and I have a nephew that carries his exact name, Ari Yoshua Weiss. I have 2 more nephews named after him, and lots of other family members, one on the way, please God. And it does bring my family, my parents especially, you know, joy to see his legacy and to see his name. And it's important for all of these people to tell Ari's story and to teach their kids who the Gibor is that they are named after. And one of the things that I'll just share with you that really made a difference for me is that evening after we all found out about Ari and were gathered in my parents' house, the army had come to kind of explain where Ari's body was and what was going to be the sequence of events leading up to his funeral the following day. And I said, you know, and they were talking about what they were doing, and I kind of piped in and I said, you know, at what point do they do the tahara process, the, you know, purification of all dead bodies go through this, you know,
Jewish custom.
Correct, of cleansing the body, of purifying them. And they looked at me and they said, you know, Ari doesn't go through any tahara. And I looked at them and I said, well, what do you mean? You know, everyone who dies has this process. And they said, well, you know, Ari died, Al Kiddush Hashem. He was already holy and he does not need to be purified. And I kind of like took a step back and said to myself, like, wow, you know, this is amazing. Like, he did not die a death like anyone else. He really died in, you know, in the name of our people. And like I said, Al Kiddush Hashem, and his body didn't need to go through this purification as it was already pure. And to me,
That's
that
incredible.
really stood out and made me feel like he was different. And, you know, this was, you know, unfortunately we'll never, when everyone says everything happens for a reason, I don't believe that. I don't believe that this happened for a reason. And what it's done to my parents, especially, is every day waking up for them is hard, and living, you know, this life of knowing what happened to their child. But kind of knowing that he was special, you know, and died for the sake of our country kind of adds a little bit more meaning and, you know, kind of ups my faith in Judaism, humanity, and Israel as a nation a little bit more.
Absolutely. I mean, we talked about this briefly, but I could just say from my experience, you know, being in America, like you mentioned, it's really hard to connect. And then you come to Israel and you're more connected, but unless you have families that you're close to, it's kind of like theoretical. You see pictures, you know, maybe you shed a tear from a movie.
Yeah.
And then a few years ago, I moved to Alon Shvut, and I moved into my landlord who lives upstairs. I lived in her part of her house, and she lost 2 of her children in a pigua.
Wow.
And then my neighbor also lost her son. And so I would wake up Yom HaZikaron morning and I'd see the families getting together and getting in their cars and going, and it put me in a whole different space. But I think that doesn't even do it, you know, that's still being an observer. But that I shared this with you, that I did lose who was like a brother to me. He was not a brother, and you cannot, I won't say it's at all the same, because it's not. I didn't grow up with him the way that you grew up with Ari, but I lost him also in the army. And we also feel the same way, that like as painful, he was the youngest of 9 children. His name was Shlomo Rindenau. He was from Passaic, New Jersey. He was a Chayil Boded, and he was killed in a fluke accident. Yeah. So for people who are familiar, and I think that is what you just said is really the most powerful point for all his siblings and his mother. Unfortunately, his father passed away during Corona. But that you just hold on to the fact that they literally died not only for the country, for the Jewish people, for God, but for our children and our grandchildren and the future of Israel. And not many of us, it's weird to say that's a privilege, but in a way,
and we're also constantly reminded, my father's a rabbi, he's a man of faith, and, he had said to us, you will see that Ari is there. You will see at different times in your life that Ari shows you that he's there, and he really has. And I've seen.
You have to tell us the story.
So there's lots of them, and my father actually wrote like a journal of different stories and different miracles that have happened and things that we see afterwards. But I remember I was single for a while, and finally I met my husband, and I was getting married. And, I remember also after Ari was killed, I was angry at God. And, I had said to my father, why did God do this? And, and my father says, God didn't do this. The terrorists did this. I said, but, God is the one who sent the terrorists. It was it still is hard for me to grasp this. And I remember begging every night, begging God before I went to sleep, please let me dream about Ari. Please, let Ari tell me in his dream that he's okay, because that was the only way that I would able to really come to terms with it. He's not here, and people say he's in a better place, but I thought that maybe only in a dream when he came to me. And to this day, I have never dreamt of him. It's been almost 20 years. I've stopped asking. Lots of other people have had dreams, but shortly before our wedding, we got married in Israel, and now in the days of social media and WhatsApp, barely, invitations aren't really sent out in the mail. So we had invited everyone in Israel, I think by email at the time, but sent actual invitations to anyone overseas. So we sent invitations out to anyone outside of the country, and I get a call from my good friend Robin, who was living in Australia, and she called me and said that she received the invitation. She said, it was so nice of you to include Ari in your invitation. And I was on the phone, and I had this puzzled look on my face. I said, what are you talking about? So she said, what do you mean? She says, look at the envelope that the invitation came in. So I went and I grabbed a copy of the invitation, and I opened up the envelope, and on the inside flap of the envelope was a picture of a lion with wings. Now, Ari, as you know, in Hebrew is lion. And there's a picture of a lion with wings. Wow. And I gasped. I started crying. And apparently the logo of the printing company is a lion with wings. And obviously I didn't know that. I didn't see that. And this wonderful friend of mine who knew Ari, and I've been friends with her for 30 years, saw this, immediately made that connection. Of course, I called my mom, and she started crying. Wow. And I really do believe that was a sign that, Ari was happy that I found someone and wanted to show that he's there with us in spirit. And I grasp onto these things. These are the things that keep us believing in God and, showing us that he's still with us. And we have lots of examples of things like this that happen in life. And I think that they're beautiful. And important to share these with other people, because other people going through things, it is important to say to them, you will get signs throughout your life that he is there with you. And, it's something very, very special.
Can you share with our listeners the incredible story you shared with me? You know what I'm talking about?
After
with
I joined
the woman
Hatzalah.
on the fridge. Yeah.
Okay. So I'll also just preface this by saying that, Ari was killed, and he was killed saving his friend Shai. And since he was killed, I always wanted to do something good in my life, in Ari's memory, and do good deeds with Ari in mind. And I never really thought of anything that would really allow me to do that. And then this opportunity came about for me to be part of this Hatzalah amazing family. And I really thought that would be a wonderful connection to me commemorating Ari's memory. And also, Ari was killed saving a life. And here I am saving a life.
Lives.
Lives alive. Actually, last night I was part of my helped for our first delivery.
Wow.
Yeah, with Hatzalah. That was an amazing experience.
Wow.
But
that was your first delivery?
It was my first delivery in Hatzalah. I worked in the delivery ward, so I've been there a lot of times, but it was an amazing experience. After we finished this course, it was shortly after our graduation, I want to say a month in. And, I live in Modiin, and we had gotten a call that there was a man that had fallen, and he had broken his femur. And I was mishtalemet at the time. I was, just going on these calls before I was actually given my, bag with all my equipment.
The training hours to
right.
be official.
So it was, less than a minute drive from my house. So I zipped right over, and I went up, and indeed there was this older man. He was actually an English speaker. His wife was Israeli, and he was on the floor. He had fallen, and we had helped him up and, given him the initial treatment and stabilized him and waited for the ambulance to come and take him to the hospital. So as we're sitting there waiting, making small talk with them, they were a lovely couple. The woman asked my name and where I was from, and I had told her that, I live in Modiin, but I'm from Renana, and I had told her my name. And she had this look on her face, and she said, "Wait right there." And she goes into a back room, and she comes out holding a picture of my brother. And I know now, my father had printed a few thousand of these cards that have Ari's picture on one side and prayer for the soldiers that we say every Shabbat in davening. And she comes out holding one of these cards. And I don't know this woman. I had never met her before. And she says, "Do you know this person?" And I said to her, "That is my brother." What? Who are you? And how do you even have this? And I just, my body went limp. I have no idea what is going on. And she proceeds to tell me that she went to shul in Jerusalem one Shabbat, and she found this card on the floor. And it was a couple of years earlier, and she picked it up, and she didn't even know Ari's story. It just had his name on it. So she knew his name, and she kept that card. And, she said, if I find a picture of a fallen soldier on a card, I'm going to keep it. And this was towards the beginning of Corona, and it was a little bit after Yom HaZikaron, and she had that card, and she said to herself, that was the year where everything was closed. There was a lockdown in the country. We were not allowed to attend the ceremonies at the cemeteries. We had to commemorate the day in our house with our immediate family only. It was a very hard day for my family, especially not being able to be together. And she pulled out that card, and she put it next to her computer, and she said, families can't be together on Yom HaZikaron, so I am going to be together with this family. And she put it in front of her computer, and she said she looked at it every day when she was working. And this is my brother. And I don't know this woman, like I said, never met her before. She didn't know who I was. And here she is. I go to her house to help her husband, and she just pulls out a card of my brother. And It was surreal, and it has bonded us from then until now. She just called me before Pesach to wish me a Chag Sameach. She's into embroidery. She embroidered a tara on a talit on a talis for my family, and she gave it to them. And every boy who gets called up for Anim Zemirot now wears this talis with Ari's name on it in shul. She made mezuzahs for my kids' rooms. She's written children's books that she's given me copies of. And, again, this is just another sign from Ari showing us that we are on the right path. And I really think that in Hatzalah, it has really shown me that I was supposed to do this, that I'm doing a good thing, that Ari is with me in this. And, it was really, you can't make these things up. These things happen. And, it happened to be shortly after I finished, and it was me who went to the call, and it was us waiting for the ambulance to come, and all of these pieces kind of fell into place, and you come out with this uplifting, emotional story that
and friendship
everyone loves to hear, and it was just beautiful. And this is what it's like to be a Jew, to be in Israel, to be part of an organization that helps people. And these are the kinds of things that keep us going.
Incredible. When you told me that story, I remember being like, what?
Yeah.
It's really just...
Even my mom, my parents came and met her, and it was just... It continues to wow me when you just think about the series of events and the coincidences,
nothing's coincident, right?
Right. The word for coincidence in Hebrew is mikre, mem, kuf, resh, hey. But if you switch around the letters, it's rak mi Hashem, only from God. So
I love that.
You really feel that this is really what's meant to be.
What other ways did your family, you said your father printed many of these cards and gave them out, and you joined the United Hatzalah to become a medic. Are there other people in the family or other things that you did to commemorate his name and his memory?
So my father helped raise funds and built the biggest shul in Ra'anana, where my family lives. The biggest shul in Ra'anana is called Ohel Ari, which is named after Ari. They have over 1,000 people daven there every weekend, every Shabbat. They have an English-speaking gan. They have, classes and kiddushes and bar mitzvahs and shiurim, and obviously different.
Is this Rabbi Eitan Ben David?
Yes, that is his shul. And first of all, to see his name plastered outside on the building, and you walk in and there's a picture of him, and it's beautiful. It's not the shul that my family davens at on a weekly basis, but we go there from time to time. My dad speaks there. We're all a family. Most of us are a family of speakers. So my parents speak all over the world. They're speaking this Yom HaZikaron. I have one brother who lives in the States. Every year he goes to a different school and speaks about Ari. Like I said, there are families who find it very hard, and it is very hard. But I guess because we come from this other world, this Anglo world of, not knowing what this day was about and suddenly feeling it up close and personal, feel it's really important to share our story. So we do a lot of that. There's a park in Ra'anana named after Ari. There's, numerous plaques, and, his names are on the lips of thousands of people all the time. He's inspired people to go into certain units in the army. There's a Nachal Andarta, a memorial up in Pardes Chana, a little bit in the north of Israel. And every year my family goes there. I laid a wreath there last year on the yearly ceremony that they have. And we open up every fallen soldier there has a drawer. It's all the soldiers of the Nachal Brigade. And we find letters there every year. And again, we're talking about almost 20 years later of Chayalim who, many of them weren't even born when Ari was killed, and find him and our family as an inspiration. And it's really heartwarming for us as a family.
There's so many things I want to say, but I think one of the biggest things of this story, which is unique because this is not a typical scenario, is the fact that he lost his life in order to save Shai's life.
Right.
And so that's, to live with that memory that someone could be so selfless in a second without, you probably had no time to think. It says everything we need to know about him, of what kind of person he was.
And we recently got our first ambulance in Modiin, and I tried very hard to raise money for this ambulance in Ari's memory. It was, like I said, it was Ari's 40th birthday last year. And Ari's favorite food, one of his favorite foods were steak and peanut butter ice cream. So I wanted to not together, although the ice cream is par. I sponsored a kiddush and I made little ice creams. It was a lot cheaper than giving everyone
a steak.
But I wanted to do something, and it was Corona, and I thought about making 40 peanut butter ice creams and selling them. Actually, my mom ended up doing that. But we had this fun to try and raise money for an ambulance. And I feel so much pride and happiness. And, I really feel like there's being in Hatzalah adds meaning to life. So I really worked hard to try and raise funds, and we raised a really nice amount of money, and we got our ambulance and
United Hatzalah ambulance, just so we're clear.
Correct. And the equipment in the ambulance was all donated in Ari's memory. And there's a big plaque in the ambulance that, shows that all of the equipment inside the ambulance was donated in his memory. And, last night I was on a shift. And
Are you an ambulance driver?
I'm not a driver. That is not me.
No, never.
No,
okay,
no,
never mind.
Not for me. But, sitting in the backseat of an ambulance, even last night, it's Yom HaZikaron is coming up, Yom HaShoah is coming up, and, also my family's connected to that. But, looking at that plaque as I'm riding in the ambulance really just kind of puts everything together. Me, my family, Ari, my work in Hatzalah, what Hatzalah does as an organization, I think just completes the picture and, really puts everything together and, describes what we are as a nation. And really just, I think, is what we're all about.
Absolutely. Have you ever had to, did you ever end up in a call that was related to a pigua, to a terrorist attack in Israel? Have you ever been involved in anything revolving around terrorism?
No, I live in Modiin. It's pretty quiet, suburbia.
Happy to hear that.
I think if I would disconnect from my past and just do what needs to be done. I've been at some very hard calls. And, you have to kind of see what the end goal is, and that is to be there for the people and to get them that initial help that they need, which many times is life-saving. And, I kind of feel Ari's pat on my shoulder every time I go on one of these calls, and he does give me the strength to, see these hard things, and then be able to come home, to my family and kind of put that past me and just do what I need to do.
Wow. It's also probably so difficult, like that your husband and your kids didn't know him, like this huge part of you, but they know him through his memory.
Yeah. My kids, we talk about him a lot. My kids talk about Uncle Ari all the time. And even my daughter, who's 6, she, often when she'll do something, she'll do a mitzvah and she'll say, I'm doing a mitzvah so that Mashiach can come so that I could see Ari. Aww. And, it's beautiful. And like I said, he's a part of our family. We have pictures of him all over and talk about him. I think it's very healthy to know who he was and what he did. And, I speak in my kids' school every year. He loved Reese's peanut butter cups. I hand them out to all the kids and, want to show my kids that their uncle was a hero and was a gibor, and they should be proud of him. And, my son is named after him, and, obviously feel sad on this day, but also feel that personal connection and be proud. And they talk about it. And, he is part of our day, even though he's been gone for almost 20 years, he is part of our daily life. And I personally think that's beautiful.
It's incredible. I mean, we have to end, but do you want to share with us, you said you had a few stories where you felt that he was really with you and that you felt his presence, and that I understood that was a message you wanted to give to people who, are dealing with grief.
It just in general, those who are not with us today, whether it be, a grandparent or, God forbid, someone who was killed tragically, they are there. And, just like one other thing that just came to mind, I remember when Shai had gotten engaged, he told his parents and she told her parents, and we were the next people who they wanted to tell. So, he is wheelchair bound and has a car that he drives with his hands, and they had driven over to our house. And obviously my parents, were very bittersweet, happy for them. He is part of our family, and my parents had brought over a bottle of wine and some shot glasses to drink a little l'chaim, and we're all sitting in the living room drinking a l'chaim, and we hear the sound of shattered glass, and we turn around, and one of the shot glasses that was in the other room moments later had fallen off of the table and had broke. And again, you kind of, when these things happen, you think to yourself, wow, what happened? And we really, and again, it was not, we weren't near the shot glasses, and it wasn't right afterwards. I guess it was wobbly, and somehow it had fallen. And, Ari was drinking a l'chaim for Shai's and Tamar's engagement right there with us. And, again, these stories are stories that you have to believe in it. And when you do believe in it, it really just makes you feel better.
Something to hold on to.
And it's beautiful. And, these things happen all the time when you're not looking for them, but you see these signs, and you just get, this feeling of he's still here with us, even though, present, he's not physically there. And, we hold on to these things, and it really gives us strength and, the faith and ability to move on with our lives.
Do you think you ever would have ended up in a situation where you were a volunteer for United Hatzalah if you didn't have this background and identity and story?
I've always had this desire, to help people. I have a gemach out of my house. I'm involved in our chesed community in Modiin. My family was always involved in chesed. But I think finding a real purpose, finding meaning in my life, and being able to say that I am doing something in Ari's memory, I think makes it so much more important and so much more meaningful. And, for my family, for my kids to see, I wear my Hatzalah gear every year and go to their school and talk to them about first aid. Mm-hmm. And I see that they're proud of me, and, they want to talk into my Hatzalah phone when it rings, and they've taken a tour of the ambulance themselves. And, you want to teach this to the next generation. And I think doing this with a purpose and knowing, that he was the inspiration to doing what you're doing, I think just makes every call you go on just that much more meaningful and worth it.
It's interesting. I've heard this many times, but people who are not against Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Memorial Day, or Yom HaZikaron, Memorial Day, but that for them, they feel, why do you need a day? I think about this 24/7 all around the year, 365 days a year. So I think it's important, right, for the calendar, for the purpose of society. But for me, it sounds like this is you being a medic in Hatzalah and you having been through what you've been through. It's almost like it's Yom HaZikaron every day.
It is. So to some degree, it is. I think every day is a personal Yom HaZikaron for me and my family. But on Yom HaZikaron itself, that is a public day for other people to hear their stories, to feel it in the air of what this country is about.
So Ari Weiss, and his Hebrew name is Ari
Yeshua
Ben
Shmuel Menachem Halevi.
Shmuel Menachem Halevi.
Right.
So if anyone wants to keep that name in mind today, his neshama should have an Aliya, and every soldier that we've lost and every person that has given up their life for this country and for our people, their names should live on forever and ever, and their memories should live on. And I can't imagine what it is to have to tell this story so many times, but I want to thank you for sharing with us, because it just takes a very theoretical concept and really just makes it into, peanut butter cups. He loved peanut butter cups,
right.
When I hear that.
And it's just something relatable to everyone.
Right. So thank you for coming in and for sharing with us and your family.
And may we all only know good things,
Amen.
Happy occasions,
Amen.
And be blessed to one day have Mashiach come and celebrate with all the people that are no longer here with us.
Amen. Ken Yiratzon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the United Humans podcast.
Share this with a friend, subscribe, and we already know you're going to leave us a positive review, so we'll just thank you now for that.
Bye.
Adios.